About our honorees: Karen Phillips, FASLA, ASLA New York President's Award for Inspiring the Next Generation. Karen Phillips began her training in landscape architecture nearly 50 years ago.
I was born and raised in Ocilla, Georgia, a rural town in South Georgia. And my family was civic activist and also in the construction business. That was their way of surviving a Jim Crow South, where our environment and our livelihoods were very segregated. There were no parks for the African American community. Because my uncles could build things that looked better, I thought, oh, how can I be a part of that? And I stumbled on this profession called landscape architecture. In University of Georgia, I discovered a program that was at that time called the School of Environmental Design. I thought, I can learn how to do this to improve the lives of people and communities that had no control over their environment.
Landscape architecture has been the guiding force behind the projects, programs, and organizations in which Karen has participated and contributed to. Though her practice has taken the path of environmental and urban design, Karen has focused within the nonprofit sector and public service.
I came to New York City and worked for public agencies in doing primarily commercial economic development and real estate development projects, and was appointed as the representative of the public advocate of the city of New York to the New York City Planning Commission. And that gave me a view of the entire city and a way that I could ask the hard questions, or to make sure that it was not just what you were doing, but how you went about it.
Karen's civic engagement activities carried over into her appointment to City Planning Commission by New York City public advocate Betsy Gottbaum. After nearly 10 years participating in rebuilding New York City after 9/11, Karen continued public service as the Regional Director of New York State Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation, and later as a policymaker for New York State Homes and Community Renewal, where she crafted and instituted the guidelines for making energy-efficient and sustainable projects under their jurisdiction. While working on large economic development projects and commercial redevelopment plans for public agencies, Karen found her passion and mission as a volunteer in Harlem.
I think of Harlem as home. Coming here as a 6-year-old, I was just enthralled by a neighborhood where there was a huge pride and historic legacy of the Harlem Renaissance and people being able to control their neighborhood. And when I came back after graduate school in the 80s, 25 years later, it was like a place where a bomb had been dropped.
To address these systemic conditions, Karen used her ability in landscape architecture, planning, real estate, finance, and development.
Realizing that the strength of the neighborhood in African American communities was generally the Black church. And I thought to work with a historic church like Abyssinian, which was in a neighborhood that it wasn't going to leave, but all around it had been desolated. So I offered to volunteer, and that volunteerism led to being involved in redeveloping the area around the church and forming the Abyssinian Development Corporation with the members of that church.
Rather than being the designer of projects, Karen became a facilitator of change.
If the residents could see immediate return in terms of clearing a lot, planting flowers, it helped them gain the sense of hope that this area could change and be improved and look like other neighborhoods. And Harlem could become, once again, a part of Manhattan. And people would come to dinner in Harlem just like they would go to dinner in the Village. The design that was implemented for Frederick Douglass Circle greatly improved the entrance to the Harlem neighborhood that was thriving and highlighted the African American legacy that made Harlem famous.
Understanding the impact of climate change being greater in poor communities where a high percentage of people of color reside paved the way for Karen to create policies and guidelines for energy efficiency and sustainable projects. This important work that affected affordable housing combined Karen's passion and experience in working in disadvantaged communities with her knowledge as a landscape architect and a desire to improve the environment for those residents.
Landscape architecture is an ideal profession for people to change environments. I would encourage more people of color to be a part of this profession, to gather the skills, the practice, and the training for young professionals who may not have had the exposure. It's incumbent to make that extra effort, to focus on not just the words of equality or inclusion and equity, but to live it.